Welcome to the Pop Culture Lab, where we break down your favorite movies and TV shows. This week, we're talking about AI and the writer's strike. Connor, let's get in the lab, buddy.
Hello, back after some time.
This lab feels like a glove.
Yes, like slipping into an old glove.
Like some warm slippers.
Ah, yeah, nicely worn in. Indeed, our friend Cameron here has been off in a faraway land across the sea for the last couple of weeks.
España, or as they call it, España.
Only in Barcelona. But yeah, even though we put out 2 episodes, that was a sneaky trick we pulled where we pre-recorded a couple. But in fact, Cameron has been no here, and now he's back. We're happy to have him.
I've returned a little bit tanner. I was hoping to show off my nice tan to everybody here in Seattle, but it was in the 80s pretty much the whole time I was gone. So now I feel like I'm blending in with everyone, which is not fun.
No, we're still really pale. He doesn't see it. He's more tan and he's more man.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
I am all that is man.
And I'm a fan.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's enough rhyming for now.
I'm a poet and I didn't know it.
Yeah, of course.
All right. What have you been watching? Have you been watching anything? Did you watch anything on the plane?
I tried. I started Top Gun Maverick, which was one of the movies that was on the plane. But I had those shitty headphones that they hand out to you that are just like absolute pieces of garbage. And
It sounds all tinny.
yeah, I listened to pretty much the first 30 seconds of the movie, and I could already tell I was just going to hate the experience. So I turned that off.
And that, frankly, is the kind of movie that should be seen on the biggest screen you can find, not the smallest.
Totally agree, and it was just kind of a reach, but didn't work out for me. I had big plans to watch House of the Dragon on my iPhone, but that's not a bigger screen either, and I feel like similarly, it's visually impressive. You want to watch something like that on at least a more comfortable and a bigger screen, so didn't do that either. But what I did watch before I left for Spain was The Last of Us. Finished it and loved it. It's well worth all the praise it's gotten, I think.
Yeah, and you think it carried it through to the end of the season?
I did. I mean, it definitely had the emotional impact. I thought it was really strong all the way through to the end. I did feel like it was obviously an intentional choice at the end, and obviously there are going to be spoilers here, so heads up. But it was definitely a choice at the end to have the kind of him mowing down all the people in the hospital be almost completely silent, which I just thought was interesting. For me, it did deaden the impact a little bit, and I know that was probably what the effect they were going for, is that he's almost numb to the impacts of everybody else other than Ellie. And so that came through, but it also felt like it kind of numbed me as an audience member to what he was doing too, which I don't know if that was the intended impact.
No, I think that's a good observation, because I felt similarly. It's like they dialed the coldness up to 11, and rather than just letting his performance, the coldness in his performance, speak for itself, they amplified it in other ways,
right,
within the scene and just the way it was shown and shot, and and the music, the lack of sound. I agree. It might have been a couple steps too far and sort of undermined itself, oddly enough.
A little bit, for sure. I thought it's too bad, because I think the episode before is the one with David, the kind of crazy religious freak. And I thought
rapist.
Right. And I thought that was probably I don't know if it's the best, but one of the most memorable and impactful and well executed episodes of the show overall.
Definitely.
And so I thought it was a little bit of a bummer that they didn't completely stick the landing, but overall I thought it was an incredible show. So
Isn't that the second to last episode?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I thought after how well they did that episode, it's too bad that they didn't then
Well, the one where he kills everybody, that's the final. That's not the second to last.
No, it's the final one.
Okay. Yeah, it's been longer since I saw it, but
indeed,
great show. We'll do an episode on it.
We will.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what have I been watching? Let's see. I've been watching a ton of things because you've been gone. We haven't been podcasting.
Time to fill.
Yeah. I don't know. Will I even list everything right now? I'll probably only talk about a couple of these.
You've been watching Beef, right?
Yeah, that's the first thing on my list. Yeah, actually, yeah. So I watched Beef on Netflix. Steven Yeun, is that how you say his name? And Ali Wong, the comedian. It was good. It was good. It was very hyped, and so I went into it with some expectations, I think, and overall it was good. I mean, I'm more of a movie guy than a show guy, and so if a show isn't really hooking me, I will bail on it sooner than later, a little bit. And so I didn't bail on this. Like I stuck it out all the way through the whole show, so that speaks to it. It was good. Another thing that colored my expectations is it has like a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Very well rated.
That's a little much. For starters, of the 10 episodes, 2 of them could go.
Huh.
So a little long. I think there's a bloatedness across the board in content, whether it be movies or TV shows. I think runtimes and, for the most part, series lengths, except for Disney Plus, need to be kind of checked a little bit. They are going a little bit crazy. And, I think we could do a whole different episode on that problem versus the maybe or maybe not shrinking attention span of all of us. But even attention span aside, I think that the storytelling could be tighter in most of these. It's a problem of just literal bloatedness. It's not that my attention span can't handle it. It's just that there's too much. They could have cut more. They need to be more. Like, I understand this is your baby. You made this piece of content. This whatever this show is your child. You don't want to cut scenes or episodes, but I just think they could have moved things along a little bit better. And because the core thing is this beef between them. They get in a car thing and
a road rage
thing, and it leads to all these things that spiral out of control and affect their whole lives. And some things, like Ali Wong, she creates this fake account to kind of dupe Stephen Young's brother, and she starts chatting with him, but then they actually kind of start liking each other and a relationship forms there. That's a very interesting exploration of how something tangentially from this road rage incident comes out, because she's trying to mess with both of them intentionally by creating these fake accounts. So she's trying to lure him, but it doesn't go her way. So that's all related and connected and interesting. Some stuff just felt like, for the sake of it, Stephen Young's character is really going through a lot, and he's really depressed, and it's kind of his arc overcoming a lot of that. But there's a lot of really heavy-handed religious church stuff too that I don't know. To each their own. I'm sure some people would enjoy that maybe more than I would. I just I can't really. I don't relate to going into church and singing until I break into tears and having an emotional catharsis. That's not the place where I do that personally. Mm-hmm. So it just seemed odd. And I don't know, the character had been so cynical at so many other times. And even after that, he's basically a borderline criminal. I don't know. I did not love every direction it went in, suffice to say. That's a rambling way of saying it went in too many different directions and not all of them paid off. And some did, but you could have cut some of that. Ended up with 8 episodes, and that would be a 96% for me.
One thing I'd be curious to hear from you is what I've heard about Beef, and one of the main elements is that the conversations that Ali Wong has with her therapist. And this is something that I think we could probably have a full episode on, is just mental health and introspection and reflection. Putting that kind of front and center is really widespread right now. I think even in stand-up comedy, I think you can see that there's been this massive shift from kind of the traditional one-liners or telling jokes to now it's much more of a storytelling and reflection about your life, and then interspersing jokes within that, and and more funny situations, and the ways that your life plays out. And so, what was your take on how that showed up in Beef? Because I've heard some people say it's a highlight, but it sounds like maybe that didn't quite work for you.
No, I would say that is like that's. I'd say don't necessarily even look at it as like a comedy. There's things that are funny about it, but it's not even like a sitcom in the way that you're describing that would explore mental health issues. It really explores mental health issues big time, and I think it's really about how the things that you do, or maybe even, or in some cases, and probably especially for the Stephen Young character, don't deal with about yourself, how that erupts out and then affects other people and your life. Your life can fall apart from not really coming to terms with your own mental health. Mm-hmm. And that's, at the end of the day, both of these people. They're deeply, deeply like unhappy and depressed and messed up, and they're just not dealing with that stuff, and they're channeling it into rage. And so it's certainly about that. And most of that's handled really well. I just, as a story and the plotting, I didn't appreciate every direction it went in, but emotionally, it really resonated. Again, not as funny, but that's not necessarily the point, and I'm totally cool with that.
Well, I didn't mean to just limit. I use stand-up comedy as an example, but I think it's there are a lot of shows that are even explicitly about this, like Shrinking, the show with Harrison Ford, and I mean, what was the one with Jonah Hill and Emma Stone, where they're doing like experimental drugs to try to forget stuff in their lives. I don't
remember the name.
I really liked that. Maniac. I really liked that show, but I there's a lot of, it seems like that is kind of the thing du jour right now, and so I don't know. I find it interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean it is, and you should check it out and decide for yourself. It's good. Yeah. Check it out if you're curious. Right. Yeah, like if you're talking about that particular subject, it is a great exploration of that. So I'd say, I mean, I guess I was looking at it in a more overall sense that so a couple things didn't work for me, but if you're looking at it through that lens, it was highly successful, and I would definitely recommend it. Okay,
so if you just a quick snapshot, like what you said the rating on Rotten Tomatoes was like a 96 or something. Like what would you rate it just off the top of your head?
More like an 80.
Okay.
I mean, it's still really good. Yeah, there was some stuff that should have gone. But like, for example, the final episode ends with both of them sort of accidentally, like they get like basically I think they're in a car crash or whatever, and they basically end up in the woods, and they're all messed up, and it's just them, and they're lost, and their lives have fallen apart. And they ingest hallucinogenics by mistake. And so then they kind of bond over this, but they go through this whole thing. And the last episode is really fun and really special and ties everything together in a great way. So just when I was kind of like, oh gosh, a couple things need to go, that last episode
it did
really
land the plane.
Definitely. If anything, the last episode elevates it quite a bit.
It's amazing how the end to a story can really impact the way that you see that show and how successful it was.
Oh, 100%.
Because I am way more likely to forgive something that has an uneven middle if they can really land the ending.
I think that's like human beings, isn't it? You know, I mean, everyone loves a redemption story, even within 90 minutes. If you hate something and then you come back around, or not even hate it, but you're not loving it, and then you come back around and you're impressed, or you're surprised.
Well, and vice versa. If something has an excellent beginning and middle, but then you're not satisfied with the ending, I tend to think of it as kind of a failure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's how humans are.
Well, that's probably good for what we've been watching.
Sure. I'll save
you can
the rest.
save those.
I'll save the other 6 things I was going to talk about.
We got more episodes to record, so.
But go see Evil Dead Rise, guys.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about that next week.
Shout out.
Oh, so good.
Before we go into our big topic here about AI and the writer's strike, I did want to just briefly follow up on our last episode, which was about whether the movie star is dead. I was listening to another podcast, Pardon My Take, and they were interviewing Anders Holm, who plays Durs in Workaholics, for all you Workaholics fans out there. And they asked him, he was talking about how he got to where he is and his path into the successful Workaholics show and everything. And they asked him, do you feel like for contemporary people who are trying to make it, do they need to move to LA to have like a movie career or to get famous? And he said, like, absolutely not, unequivocally no. And he said, because there's just so many different paths to being famous now. Like, the people can do it in their bedrooms. They can be Twitch streamers, they can create YouTube content, they can do what. There are so many different ways that becoming famous, whatever that means, or becoming a star, there are so many paths to that you can do it anywhere in the world. And that's not to say that there isn't still an infrastructure in LA or in New York to do that, but that isn't like, that used to be the way. Like, if you wanted to be famous, you kind of had to pack up your bags. It was kind of a Great American Dream type thing where you like Grapes of Wrath, you put it all on your back and you move to LA and you try to make it.
Or New York for music.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that is true. That is true. I mean, I think those people, though, that get famous through Twitch or YouTube or Instagram, whatever they do, they also, you need to generate your own opportunities also, those people. I mean, in some ways, being going the path of moving to LA and looking for actual opportunities to then make a movie or a show or whatever it is, in some ways that's more tangible and actually easier. I mean, it's easier to walk into a casting office and maybe convince them through an audition that you're right for the part, as opposed to just really being so savvy with your marketing and social media. I mean, maybe it's not easier. It's just a different set of skills, I guess. To me, that sounds harder, personally.
I do think it's a generational thing. I mean,
well, maybe I'm just old, yeah.
There's some element of that. I even in my own workplace, there are people who are just a couple years younger than me, but they just approach it with a lot more kind of just hands-on. Like, they are able to use all these tools at their disposal. And honestly, this is a bit of a good segue into this AI conversation, because that's one of the tools that are at people's disposal now to get things done more quickly and efficiently and appear professional. Like, that's one of the tools that you can use.
You want to know a secret?
I know how to count.
No, a real secret.
Oh, sure.
A real secret is that we, on more than one occasion, mostly at the idea of my fiance, have used ChatGPT on more than one occasion to help generate social media posts for this very podcast.
Social media posts and episode descriptions and
yeah, I've taken to doing that myself now. I think I'm pretty good. But the ChatGPT helped get the ball rolling, because if nothing else, it really tapped into the right voice of these posts. Maybe not the right voice for this podcast and our brand, but it synthesized most voices, most podcast posts sound like X. If you say ChatGPT, I want to make a post for this podcast about this movie, it's going to base that on its amalgamation of all such things, which definitely gives you a tone and a template. And so I have now taken to doing it myself, but the way in which I do it is clearly based off of the information that thing fed me, which is pretty remarkable.
Well, if you're a content creator like a podcaster like we are, or if you're an aspiring actor, or if you're a comedian or whatever, you can use that in a ton of different ways. You can use that to create a professional looking website. You can do that for your social media posts. Like, you can do that for pitching if you're going to have a meeting with some bigwigs, Hollywood bigwigs. You can do that to develop your pitch. There's a million ways you can use it.
And really, as well, you should.
Yeah. You're losing out if you don't use those tools at your disposal.
I think, especially if you're older. I mean, I don't know what everybody who's older, and I'm including myself in this. I don't know what everyone who's older than 25 thinks. But when I first heard about ChatGPT, my first instinct was like, no, I would never use something like that, and I'm better than that, and blah, blah, blah. And
feels like cheating?
Exactly. So for anyone whose knee-jerk reaction is, no, I don't need that, it feels like cheating, like, ew, gross, I'm not going to do that. what we just said is true. I mean,
you're losing out.
Get on the train or get left behind because, well, except for the writers. Let's talk about them.
So let's get in.
Yeah. So I just want to give a little bit of background on it. On May 2nd, 2023, the Writers Guild of America voted to go on strike because the negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP.
A lot of acronyms already.
I know. It fell apart due to basically their negotiations for writer compensation for streaming content specifically. This is something that back in the last writer strike of like 2007, 2008, that was actually left out. They were talking about more network television issues at that point in time, and streaming was starting to exist, so I think it got brought up, but they were like, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Sure.
So here we are.
It's easy to forget just how quickly streaming has become omnipresent.
5 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's about when Disney Plus probably launched. It's probably around 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you would stream things prior to that, but
Netflix has been around longer than that,
but the streaming services and the pluses, the Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, HBO,
about 5 years,
Maxi, whatever the hell you want to call it. Yeah. So previously, writers would get hired for long seasons of shows. You know, Eric Voss in his little thing, he used the example of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Compare that to the Marvel shows of now that have 6 episodes. That had 22 episodes a season.
Right.
And so just as a standard, these shows used to be longer and they would have 10, 15, 20 episodes. And so the writers would get hired for that entire time. They would be hired for that season. And then if the show did well, they'd stay on for multiple seasons, which would also give them sort of tenure in their writing positions. In the writing room, they actually move up. So one of the issues with the shorter seasons, for example, is not only are the writers only contracted for 6 episodes, it's just that one season. It's just one season of Miss Marvel, and then she shows up in the movie. There's not meant to be other seasons. So they're out of a job again. It becomes a gig. So basically, whereas writers used to be able to find long-term employment by working on subsequent, seasons of shows and things like that, it's just now short-term gig things. And things like Batgirl, where Warner Brothers literally cancels an entire movie as a tax write-off. Mm-hmm. All the writers for that, I mean, they that never got made. So they got paid for that time. But if the thing that you put your writing into doesn't get made, then it's not really a credit and you can't really evolve your career. Mm-hmm. And that's all because it's at the behest of streaming services. I think Batgirl was developed for a streaming service. It was developed for HBO Max, and then they axed it because they wanted a little extra cash. But this all revolves around streaming services and the way that they now distribute content and the shorter seasons, and it basically all revolves around that. In addition, those longer seasons used to have residuals, so they could get paid later on after the fact, and now these streaming ones don't, because television network shows had residuals and streaming ones don't. Right. So they're trying to negotiate and change those kinds of
because it's not
rules.
It's not syndicated. It's just always available on the platform.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a one-time payment thing.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So that's a huge sticking point.
I mean, there are people who that pays for the rest of their life. If they have a hit show, then
look
they're
at Larry
gonna be,
David.
Right? They're going to be Oh yeah, Larry David's a perfect example.
Exactly. He just has raked. He's a writer, and he just raked in the cash from Seinfeld.
Yep.
Also, some other things about the current pay structure basically means that if the writer gets paid a certain amount of money, then they get 20% deducted for their agent or manager. Then they have to split also their salary with the rest of the writer's room. So they end up with a pretty low salary. And then, like I said, if they're working just gig to gig and they're out of a job for 6-7 months, that's a huge problem when you only had a $30,000 paycheck, whatever it is. Yeah. And then Netflix actually is another great example of streaming. Is they are known for, I mean, we talk about Disney, but Netflix is known for axing shows after one season. Their whole business model is try, throw it at the wall.
Yep.
And if it's not popular, we'll just cancel it. The writers clearly suffer the most from that.
Yeah. Well, also just burnout. I mean, the business model is always about getting more subscribers, right? And one of the things that Disney Plus is struggling with is that you have to have enough content to keep people interested in your service. Otherwise, they're going to stop paying for their subscription. And so that means that it behooves them to have more and more content coming out all the time, right? Which means it's like a sugar rush. You get like a little bit of this, you get a little bit of that, you get a little bit of this, you get a little bit of that. And that incentivizes them to be doing exactly what you're talking about, which is experimenting with a little bit of content in any particular thing and seeing what sticks. But that's not good if you're the one guy who's working on that one show that didn't end up being successful. And that some of that has been the case for any show before streaming, but it is exacerbated. It is like it is just to the max, dialed up to 11.
No pun intended. HBO.
Yeah, to the max.
But exactly. Really where the negotiations broke down is when the writers basically said, okay, we want these better conditions. We want a better pay structure. We want literally like bigger writers' rooms, better ones. Not to go into too much detail, but there's these things called mini rooms, which are like little breakout writers' rooms that they do for short kind of writing projects that supplement other things. I don't want to go into it. I only just learned about it today. I don't maybe even fully have my head around it. But anyway, these writers, when they work in the mini rooms, they don't get paid nearly as well as the writers in the full writers' rooms. So one of the things was to negotiate equal pay for those different types of rooms. I mean, if you're writing, you're writing. You should be getting paid. And then their last stipulation that they were asking from the AMPTP, this is the Writers Guild asking the Producers Alliance, they basically said, and you also have this provision, like you're not going to use AI basically to generate movies. It's not going to be your source content. You're not going to use AI to supplement what we write, et cetera, et cetera. And basically the studios were just like, no. Like flat no. No, come back with a negotiation, no anything, just especially to that provision, they're like, no. I mean, because the writers, and this is a sticky one. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out as a negotiation, because the writers are kind of asking the studios, never use AI in your movies. And the studios are like, why on earth would we agree to that ever?
Yeah.
And I can frankly see both sides.
Sure.
So that is really the crux of it. And so I think, we can talk a little bit about, when we already have talked about a little bit about what's fair to the writers. And I think for the second half of this discussion, we should really touch on, is AI legitimately a threat to these writers? Should they be as afraid as they are? Is it right for the studios to want to use AI, at least to some extent? Is there room for that? Is there room for AI and writers? What could the world look like if AI was used by studios to make movies? Do you think that would be the norm, the standard? Would that just take over? Would AI completely eliminate the need for the writer? Or is there a world in which maybe there'll be some middle ground? Because it's very unlikely that the writers are just going to get their way and that AI is never going to factor into movies at all. That seems near impossible. So if AI is going to factor in some way or another, what might that look like? And is that ultimately good or bad? Eric Voss, to go back to him again, and I give him all the credit in the world, he did an incredible deep dive video on this that really inspired us to want to talk about it. I mean, he made the argument that at the end of the day, if you're talking about good writing, quality writing, because he used the example of Marvel, which we talked about, a movie could just be a series of Easter eggs and callbacks.
Yeah.
AI could generate that.
Right.
But if you want something that's going to move you, that speaks to the soul, because only someone with lived human experience could have possibly written it, if you want that, then there's no way AI can ever fully replace that. I can, if you think of the Matrix, freaking most advanced AI you could possibly fathom, Turing test passing AI, I still think at the end of the day, if you're talking about art, there's going to be a soul problem. I do believe that.
I find that really interesting. And I mean, thankfully, we have many years of interesting sci-fi movies to fall back on that have explored this idea. I mean, because the first thing that comes to mind for me is, of course, Ex Machina, which explores the idea of when does a machine, an AI, become human, and how can you tell?
It's a Turing test played out. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what is intrinsic to the, I hesitate to say message, but the theme of that movie is that anything alive wants to be free, right? And in that, it poses that an AI probably could display humanity in that way.
But there is a difference between being convincingly human in the set of circumstances that movie presents versus creating art that to the most discerning human, like, that's what I don't buy. I could buy that I could have a conversation with you over a phone or in a room and think, oh, you're human and you're generating your own thoughts. I could definitely see myself being convinced by that. Or not even myself, but like an art critic or someone who's just has even more intelligent than I am, that is just like so dialed into, you know what I mean? Like, you know, when you listen to great reviewers and writers talk about other art and you're like, oh my God, couldn't even articulate that. Like someone with that level of scrutiny, I just don't see how an AI could fool them.
I understand what you're saying.
Because at the end of the day, it's a facsimile.
Right. You're talking about an excellent facsimile, an excellent, perfect copy, or something that was generated in organic. And I mean, the word organic is almost perfect because organic has kind of two meanings here, right?
But I guess for me, the question is it possible for there to be no diminishing returns? I don't think so. I think every time you make that facsimile from AI, you lose that much. And
I disagree. I disagree. I don't think it's possible right now, but I absolutely think it's possible in theory. And like with the rate that our technology is evolving, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in our lifetime. I mean, I really don't.
But it's the same question of virtual reality. Do you think that virtual reality could come to the point to convince you that you would know the difference? You're living in the Matrix?
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. I think it's possible. We haven't ever seen it, not yet, but do I think it's possible? Yeah, I do.
I think there's something deeply, innately human that would question, would raise a flag, something.
I don't know. Cypher in the Matrix kind of convinced me. If I taste this delicious steak and my brain tells me it's a steak and it's juicy, and I don't know. I think that at some point to
me, I think we're all Truman and we're all going to find our way out someday. That's how I look at it. Like if the world was virtual reality, like it basically is for Truman, you're gonna see the cracks eventually. And whether it's art, virtual reality, whether it's AI making art or like movies or being in virtual reality, whatever's being produced artificially inevitably will show itself as such. The artificial can never become organic fully. It's not possible. They're fundamentally opposed. That's like saying alive can be dead. Day can be night. They can't.
I don't know that I'm convinced by that. I mean,
well, I'm not trying to convince you. That's just how I feel.
I think it's a fascinating question. I love these types of questions. This is probably my favorite genre of movies, honestly, is things that explore these types of questions. And there's no way, well, I mean, there is one way to know, and we may find out in our lifetimes.
So that's the next thing I was going to say. I hope not.
Yeah.
I frankly don't. If AI can be that good or virtual reality, whatever you want, I don't want to be around for it.
No?
Oddly enough, no.
I think that is an interesting... I hear what you're saying. And
I would put a computer chip in my brain and do all sorts of crazy medical technology. Like, I love technology. I would, like, turn myself into a cyborg, but I wouldn't want to never see something made by a human ever again.
Well, I think that's a different thing.
That breaks my heart in a way.
I think that's a different thing, though.
They are different things, yeah.
What you just said is different than what we were talking about, I think. Which is, if AI were to get to the point where it is so convincing that you can't tell the difference between something that was made by humans and made by machines, is different than human art is dead. Like, I don't think that that's the same thing. I think there's maybe room for both.
Well, and there is, and I think we should talk about that. But let's, for the sake of argument, if AI got to be that good and humans just went, well, this is much easier, and all art was effectively generated by AI and human art kind of died, even if you couldn't know the difference, you know what I'm saying? That is like being in the Matrix. I mean, I would rather be out of the Matrix than in the Matrix. I'd rather be... I wouldn't be Cypher.
You see that there's something... I find this interesting. Like, there's almost an involuntary revulsion to this idea
exactly.
that there's something fake about it. And I totally hear that.
And even if I truly couldn't know the difference, just the thought of that being my fate scares the living hell out of me, frankly. Yeah. Which is funny because I probably love technology more than you do.
Way more than I do. And yet to me, like, if you can't tell the difference, then what is the distinction that you're making? And isn't that, like, to me, then there is a certain level of humanity that has been imbued in something that can create human art. If AI is to the level where it is creating something new and novel that humans haven't created before, then isn't that a kind of humanity?
Well, that would be interesting. Well, a lot of what we're talking about. Well, no, a lot of what we're talking about is AI generating facsimiles of what humans create, which for the most part, for the foreseeable future, is what it will be for a very long time. But if an AI made a movie about what it's like to be an AI, that would be interesting.
So there you go.
Okay, but I'd like to learn about the AI.
But to me, that's art. That is the art that we're talking about. When I'm saying you can't tell the difference, I'm saying that it's not that, like, you could put them next to each other and you can't tell which one was made by a machine and which one was made by a human. I'm saying that if AI is showing the characteristics of human-made art in that way, that it's a new, novel thing that was created, like, not copied, created, then really what distinction are we making about who made it?
Well, that I agree with you, and that is sort of where artificial intelligence does become sort of fully, you don't want to say human because only humans are human, but it kind of is. So I do hear you there. But
you don't even think that, to return to earlier in this conversation, you don't even think that's really possible.
I hesitate to think that that's possible. I think that it's very hard to tell, but that feels like the fantasy part of the sci-fi word, or the fiction part, rather, I should say, because...
Yeah. Well, we're definitely very far from that.
Yeah. And also, just to go back to what you were saying for a second, anytime if an AI set out to tell a human story, a Marvel movie, whatever, that's where I guess I would take issue. Like, I wouldn't want to live in a world where I couldn't tell the difference between where everything was just made by every movie that I wanted to see was just made by AI because you couldn't tell the difference. Like, I hear what you're saying. If an AI did something truly that a human almost couldn't come up with, well, that's awesome. And it's awesome in one sense, but that also is terrifying because if an AI can do that, then what else can it do? That feels like an AI that could extinguish the human race, potentially. That's
where everybody always goes to.
Well, shit, yeah. I mean, you just said it.
But the human race...
That's what Ex Machina is about.
But the human race can extinguish the human race. That's the thing, is that everybody acts as though, like, this is a uniquely, like, a unique danger from AI. Like, we're already our own worst enemy.
Well, agreed. And we're the ones who created the AI, so that still applies.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
But in Ex Machina, she wants freedom. So I guess what I'm saying is if the AI is smart enough to create a piece of art based on its lived experience, then it's going to want to be free. And we might stand in its way.
Sure.
So that's a whole other thing. But I guess what I was saying is AI in the more foreseeable future generating human quote unquote content, like an AI setting out to masquerade itself as a human writer. That's not its goal, but that's what it's being used for.
Well, I think some Marvel movies that are coming out these days are bad enough that AI could probably already spit out the writing that is coming out for some recent releases.
I agree. I mean, and and I think we both think at the end of the day that there are, I mean, I don't want to like keep ripping off of Eric Voss, but I think what really between you and me started this conversation kind of the other day was when we learned, and I actually took some more notes on this. What he said in his video was that a lot of viewers don't even watch New Rockstars videos or deep dive videos for Eric Voss. In fact, and the analytics prove it. In fact, 30% of viewers in their latest like Guardians of the Galaxy video, 30% of viewers clicked ahead past the intro of Eric Voss, just straight to the Easter eggs, straight to the breakdown. No human. So 30%, a third of them skipped ahead in the video. And the comments are saying things like, enough with the jokes. We don't like your impressions. We don't like your personal anecdotes. We don't like your hot takes. Just shut up and literally feed us a list of Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Well, guess what could do that?
Yeah,
AI.
yeah.
And if the fans just want a list of Easter eggs in their YouTube videos that are breaking down the movie, what's to say that they don't just want a movie that's a frickin'
list of Easter eggs?
Or, oh, we just took Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns and just made it into a movie. It's the exact comic. Now it's a movie. Flashpoint. Now it's a movie. Secret Wars. Screw all the stupid, we're going to adapt this for the movies and we got to have Robert Downey Jr. Screw all that. Oh, we're going to have it exactly like the comics. I mean, there is a subset of, I think, moviegoers that would totally gobble up. I mean, Fast and Furious franchise, like those movies are repetitive as hell. Like, could AI not generate, like even now, like you said, the stupidest movies that we watch, Transformers? Like, I think there's some people that would still turn out in hundreds of millions of people to go see stupid shit.
You're
like that.
totally right. But I guess my point is that those things already exist as created by humans. Like the Fast and the Furious movies are already kind of just the same stuff that they just spit out, and they are written by humans, but you almost couldn't tell, right? And so like I guess that is where I'm challenging this distinction. It's like, well, if it can be easily replicated by AI, then what was the value add from the quote unquote humanity for whatever, some garbage movie?
Well, and I do agree with you. And that's why I think ultimately, at the end of the day, life is about balance. And the ultimate truth of what's going to happen with all this is probably somewhere in the middle, like most things.
Probably.
AI is not going to be the thing that takes over the world and never going to see a human movie ever again. And then it's going to make a piece of art that's beautiful and kill us all. That's probably not going to happen. And also, you know, the other opposite extreme is not going to happen.
Yeah.
What's probably going to happen is that, like we're saying, for big, stupid, dumb franchise movies, you might have AI generating a lot of those screenplays, or at least maybe the human writes the story and then it generates it from there or supplements it. Or especially when you're talking about interconnected universes, they could use AI to just generate what reference are we going to pull and what crossover. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of things that AI could, especially really, really sophisticated AI, could, in fact, help with. And I'm sure the writers don't want to hear that at all, because that does put them to some extent out of a job. But if you can't, but like you just said, Fast and the Furious or whatever, if you can't write better than the AI, that's kind of your problem.
Right.
So the world is changing and the AI is going to get better and better. And so I think what's going to happen is that we're going to have, James Gunn couldn't get replaced by an AI. Something that was imitating what he's doing would still feel like an imitation, for example. And he's not even the best writer in the world, but he's a good writer. Mm-hmm. And so I think at the end of the day, the the best writers in Hollywood or anywhere for that matter will just rise above. Stephen King, I'm sorry, even if you amalgamated all his books, you couldn't do what he does.
Yeah.
So the best writers will rise above and they'll create things that people will probably go to see in theaters. It'll be a special thing. You may maybe pay a little bit more money. And then AI will just dump the new Transformers movie on your streaming service. And there you go. It may look something like that.
I think you're right. I think that's most likely. And as is the case with most strikes and negotiations between employees and employers, that's usually the way it shakes out, is there's a lot of storming and blustering and posturing, and then it lands somewhere in the middle, and everybody has to make some concessions. And you're probably right, it will impact some writers. I think there's no doubt about that. But
which is a shame. We don't want anybody to lose their job. Let's make that clear.
No.
But realistically, it's going to be a tough battle.
It is, and this is just one battleground on what AI is going to impact a lot of sectors, and is already doing so. So it'll certainly be interesting to see how it plays out.
It is. And at the end of the day, too, WGA is a union, and they need to be treated as such. So that's an important part of the story, too. Even outside of AI, unions are really on the back heel in this country right now, and there's so much anti-union crap happening from big companies and all the companies that hold all the money and all the power, all the merged companies, the giant conglomerates.
Starbucks and Amazon have been fighting, efforts to unionize from their employees for the last decade.
Yeah. So not to leave that part of the story out, that's one of the hardest unions to get in, the WGA, and they do, even if you take the AI, I'm not sure how that part's going to shape out, but give them their bigger writer rooms. Like, don't treat them like crap and just do a gig from a gig. Like, if you're a streaming service and if you're Disney Plus and you're going to only hire them for a 6-episode thing, actually, you don't get to do that anymore. Hire them for 2 6-episode things or whatever.
Or, this is unlikely to happen, but, have those residuals.
Or give them residuals, right. Come up with a new form of that for streaming. They deserve something. They literally can't even live right now. They should be able to live middle-class lifestyles.
Yeah.
They're Hollywood writers. They go to the Oscars. They shouldn't be making they should be making middle class money at least. So, it's worth noting that the last one went on for 3 months. So we'll see.
Yeah, and
this could be a while.
We didn't even really get into the fact that this is going to impact a lot of projects that are going to be that were scheduled to come out or will be delayed.
Loki, I think.
Lots of things.
Lots of Marvel projects.
There have been a ton of announcements already.
Yeah, Netflix stuff halted. Stranger Things.
And plus, you're seeing like late night hosts either pause or
Bill Maher's been off for weeks.
Yep. So it's
all late nights paused pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and then there's people are hesitant to cross a picket line, and so it'll be an interesting scenario for the next couple of months at least.
I've been writing my own late night monologues.
For
myself.
Pitching
this week.
You're gonna be a scab.
Yeah, exactly. I do my best Jay Leno impression, and then
All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see everybody next week.
That's all, folks.